With this crown, I declare you our sovereign. All hail the king! I, Esdras, saw upon the Mount Zion a great people, whom I could not number, and they all praised the Lord Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai with songs. And in the midst of them there was a young man of a high stature, taller than all the rest, and upon every one of their heads he set crowns, and was more exalted, which I marveled at greatly. Receive this crown as a blessing from the Most High. May your reign be just and prosperous. So I asked the angel, and said, Sir, what are these? He answered and said unto me, These be they that have put off the mortal clothing, and put on the immortal, and have confessed the name of Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai. With this crown I bestow upon you the legacy of our people. Rule wisely. Now are they crowned, and receive palms. Then said I unto the angel, What young person is it that crowneth them, and giveth them palms in their hands? So he answered and said unto me, It is the Son of Yahweh, whom they have confessed in the world. Then began I greatly to commend them that stood so stiffly for the name of the Lord. With this crown, I charge you to lead our people with wisdom and strength. All hail the new king. Hail! Then the angel said unto me, Go thy way, and tell my people what manner of things, and how great wonders of the Lord thy God thou hast seen. I now crown you king. All hail the new king. Long live the king!
All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I would like to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shah, Bahashem, Kakodash, and double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples towards younger brothers. And peace and blessings and salutation to the hopeful lake out there pushing his word and truth and in sincerity across the four winds in the name of Yahweh Bashim Al Shah, pushing to get up out of here. Shalom to the hopeful lake, the believers, the listeners whom have came back to the obedience of the scriptures through faith in Yahweh Bashim Al Shah. All right, and what I want to get into today is the book of Job, chapter 9 and 24. And I want to expound on these things. I found a pretty informative documentary, showing how the devils, have corrupted, these economic systems of the world. All right, these business models, okay, these corporations, on how, the few elite families, remain super rich, all right, and they monopolize, okay, these industries, okay, these economies, okay, and there's only the wealth, is set up to trickle up, okay, and for everyone else to be stuck in a certain position, okay. And the Bible, heavily condemns how this man runs the earth. The Bible even condemned, our people, that were doing these things and had wicked and corrupt, practices to become rich, all right, especially off the oppression of the poor, okay. And I want to just go into, because we go into Job 9:24 all the time. The earth is given into the hand of the wicked. And this video shows, all right, the systems that these devils have in place, okay, to where the wealth of the earth flows to them, okay? And it's going to just shed light on the precepts, we always bring out, and just to show, how these devils, all right, scheme, plot, okay, deceive, all right, within these global systems, so let's get into it. Like I said, I got a video. Our brothers are, this is edifying to you, beloved brothers, all right, and you few sisters that believe. Now, this is Job 9:24. It said, the earth is given into the hand of the wicked. He covered the faces of the judges thereof. If not, where and who is he? All right, so the earth is given into the hand of the wicked. The Lord allowed this, man, all right, according to the blessing of Isaac, to have the fatness of the earth, the dew of heaven, which is everything. Okay, because even when you go into, all right, the word earth, okay, in the Hebrew, this is literal. This man has possession of the earth. Okay. So when you go to let's see, all right, Aratazah. Okay, the Hebrew words are Aratazah, which means, all right, the whole earth. Okay, it says country, piece of ground, but it says ground, the soil, people of the land. All right, the scripture say where he heapeth to himself all people and can never be satisfied. Okay, we're gonna see that. It said land of the living. Okay, so this devil has been given the land of the living. The people, the ground, the soil. All right, and he rules in a very wicked and corrupt manner. All right, and the Bible condemns, all right, this man's style of rulership heavily. Okay, it condemns him. All right, the wicked that the Bible speaks of. Okay, and the way that he rules in the earth. Okay, so let's go from there. Get a couple more precepts, and I want to get the definition of monopoly. Okay, so when you let's see, go back to Job 9:24. Read it one more time. Then we say, well, this is Job 9:24. Said the earth is given into the hand of the wicked. He covered the faces of the judges thereof. If not, where and who is he? Okay, so this devil, has covered the faces of the judges. Okay, which are, Israelites. The rightful judges of the earth. Okay, the men, the sons of God. Okay, whom the Lord, intended to rule the earth in righteousness, integrity, and honesty, but we got corrupted. All right. So the Lord allowed this devil to come in power. Okay. And what does he do? He covered the faces of the judges thereof. He put himself in the Most High, the Messiah, okay, the prophets, our great, kings and leaders, the people, men of the Bible. He's the only nation to do that. All right, which is an indicator that he is the wicked. Okay, and who has the earth? All right, what nation of people has a possession of the earth? Okay, whose face is on the world reserve currency, man? Okay, so you go here to Proverbs. Okay, Proverbs 22, and this is how these elite bankers, okay, run the earth, through debt. Proverbs 22:7 said, the rich ruleth over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. Okay, so this devil has a system where you have these few elite, okay, rich that rule over, all right, the mass majority of the poor of the earth. You see, and they exploit everything. And see, these governments, the thing that these elites do, they put these governments in debt. They give these big, huge loans, mainly through the IMF, International Monetary Fund. Okay, they give these huge loans, okay, to these governments with crazy interest. All right. So the interest, compound to the point to where it's unpayable. All right. And guess who's collateral? All right. The citizens of that government. Okay. That's why people born on the elites. Okay. Every citizen that is born, majority of the people in the earth, when they're born, they owe the elites. All right. Due to, all right, the loans received, okay, by the leaders of these different governments. Okay. And that's why the elites are able to control policy, okay, with these different governments. That's why you see a global, okay, digital, what's called DPI, digital public infrastructure being set up because it's the agenda of the elites, okay, in which these governments are indebted to, okay. So these devils rule the earth through debt. They rule the policies and, all right, the governments of the earth through debt, okay. So the rich rule over the poor, and the borrower, okay, is serving to the lender, all right. And you jump down, and these devils, these few families are the lenders of the earth. Okay, and they do it for corrupt gain. And it's gonna go into it in the video. This is Proverbs 22:16. It says, "He that oppresses the poor to increase his riches." Okay, and these are the systems they have set up to where the poor is exploited. All right, because they keep the poor, they keep the masses in survival mode. The reason you're subjugated to working, at least 40 plus hours. Now it's turned into, you got to have overtime or two jobs. Okay, but why are you subjugated to that? Because these devils, okay, have a system where you have to go in debt to have shelter. Okay, you got to go in debt to get a vehicle. Okay, to drive to what these jobs that pay your debt. Okay, majority of people are going to work to what pay debt. You see, so you have a few getting rich while the masses, okay, are in survival mode. So they have systems set up to where, there's no, you know, you can't accumulate wealth in this system. Money come in and it go right back out. Okay, and the only thing that's consistent is what your labor. You see, that's the only thing that's consistent. Okay, so your whole life is spent surviving. Okay, while these people are accumulating real wealth from the masses. Okay, it says, and he that giveth to the rich, yeah, because it's a system that only enriches, okay, the top elite families. So here it is. He's all about, increasing the wealth of the already wealthy, okay, but constantly decreasing, all right, the ability to earn from the poor. Okay, but what does it say? It says, "He that oppresses the poor to increase his riches, and he that giveth to the rich shall surely come to want." Okay, he's going to come to want means he's going to be lacking. All right, because he devils going to lose everything and go into captivity. This is going to be a hard fall. This is going to be a hard fall, man. You know, these devils, as they say, have been living fat off the hog for a long time. Okay, for a long time, man, for generations, they've enjoyed true generational wealth, old money. Okay, off corrupt systems. You see, and now they want to go digital. All right, they want to triple, double down. Okay, on the corruption and the tyranny. Okay, and the oppression of the poor. Okay, and that's why the Lord is getting ready. All right, to break up this whole system, man. You see, so you go 28. Let's get this. Proverbs 28:15 says, as a roaring lion and a raging bear, so is a wicked ruler over the poor people. And this system is called predatory. It's a very predatory system. Okay, to where they use the economy. All right, they have weaponized the economy. They have weaponized, the resources of the earth. Okay, to devour people. Okay, not the way that this man has normalized, poverty. Okay, debt. He normalized these things. This is not supposed to be the case, man. Okay, people are supposed to have their own substance, and no one is supposed to be this dependent on the government or corporations. Am I right? He created a society where he can prey on the masses because he has created dependency. Okay, you create dependency through monopolizing. Okay, so the devil, because like I said, they call this system, this capitalistic system, this capitalist system, they call it what? Predatory. Okay, and he has a very predatory style of rulership where he devours and destroys the people that he's ruling over. Okay, verse 16 said, the prince that wanted understanding is also a great oppressor, but he that hateth covetousness shall prolong his days. So he's a prince or ruler that lacks in understanding and righteous dealings. Okay, this man hates life. You see, he has a well, people don't understand with the so-called white man. Okay, he has, all right, he's flawed. Okay, he has a character malfunction, the things that he's deficient when it comes to integrity, righteousness, fairness. All right, compassion. You see, justice. He's efficient. He doesn't have that. Okay, but he's in power. Okay, so we're seeing, a man that's deficient, that's lacking in certain qualities and things needed for rulership, rule the earth. Okay, and this is the results. Now, let's go here real quick. 'Cause like I said, I want to get this term monopoly, then we'll segue to the video. Like I said, I'm gonna let it play for the most part. It's pretty informative. This guy does pretty good, documentaries. But just real quick, what is a monopoly? Then segue. This is a quick AI overview. It says a monopoly is a market structure where a single company has exclusive control over the supply of a particular product or service with no competition. This gives the company significant power to control prices and exclude rivals. Monopolies can form through mergers, strategic acquisitions, government grants, okay, or by creating barriers, all right, to entry for other firms. Hence the term, you have gatekeepers. There's certain industries, all right, that you're not going to climb up in, okay? These devils, they say they've cornered the market, okay? And they have wealth concentrated amongst a few families, even when they so-called broke up the monopolies, okay? It still was a monopoly. You see? So let's go here. Like I said, it's a pretty informative video. Um, I say, Lord will, you brothers, sisters get something out of it. But yeah, so he's gonna explain, all right, and John D. Rockefeller, which is a branch of the Rothschilds, okay, the American Rothschilds, okay, and it's gonna show you how when they coined the oil market, okay, how they created these monopolies, okay, which these systems of complete control, okay. So let's play this.
In 1870, a 31-year-old man in Cleveland, Ohio, controlled 4% of America's oil refining capacity. By 1880, he controlled 90%. By 1904, In 1870, a 31-year-old man in Cleveland, Ohio, controlled 4% of America's oil refining capacity. By 1880, he controlled 90%. By 1904, he controlled 91% of oil production, 85% of final sales, and had created the template for every monopoly that exists today. His name was John D. Rockefeller, and the system he built, the corporate structures he invented, the monopolistic tactics he perfected, they didn't die when Standard Oil was broken up in 1911. They evolved, they spread, and they control your life right now in 2025. The gasoline you pump, the drugs you buy, the tech platforms you use, the food you eat, the banks you borrow from, every single one uses the Rockefeller playbook. Vertical integration, horizontal consolidation, regulatory capture, tax-exempt foundations that shape policy, and market dominance so complete that competition becomes impossible. Rockefeller didn't just build an oil empire, he built the architecture of modern corporate control. And you cannot escape it. Because the system isn't Standard Oil, the system is the method. And that method has been replicated by every dominant corporation for 150 years. Amazon uses it, Google uses it, Pfizer uses it, JP Morgan uses it. They all learned from the same blueprint, the Rockefeller blueprint. Control the supply chain vertically, eliminate competitors horizontally, capture the regulators, use philanthropy to buy legitimacy. And when the government finally breaks you up, make sure the pieces you control are worth more than the whole. Let me show you exactly how Rockefeller built this system, how he used it to become the richest man in history, how Standard Oil's breakup actually made him richer, and why 114 years after that breakup, you still live in the world Rockefeller designed. Because understanding the system isn't academic, it's survival. The system is designed to extract wealth from you and concentrate it at the top. And once you see how it works, you'll see it everywhere. John Davison Rockefeller was born July 8, 1839 in Richford, New York. His father was a con man who sold fake cancer cures. His mother was a devout Baptist. This combination, the con man's ruthlessness and the Baptist's moral certainty, would define Rockefeller's entire approach to business. He would destroy competitors without mercy while believing God had chosen him to organize industry for the betterment of mankind. This wasn't hypocrisy. This was genuine conviction that his monopoly was moral because it brought order to chaos and efficiency to waste. In 1859, oil was discovered in Titusville, Pennsylvania. The oil rush began. Thousands of prospectors flooded into western Pennsylvania to drill. Fortunes were made and lost overnight. It was chaos.
So his daddy sold fake. All right, cures. Okay, for cancer, man. Okay. So you know he was bred to be a con artist, man. And you see, goddamn devils, man.
Boom and bust. Overproduction collapsed prices. Then shortages spiked them. Rockefeller, who was 20 years old and working as a bookkeeper in Cleveland, saw opportunity, but not in drilling. Drilling was volatile, risky, dependent on luck. Rockefeller saw opportunity in refining, turning crude oil into kerosene for lamps. That was the real business. In 1863, Rockefeller invested $4,000 in his first oil refinery in Cleveland. Within 2 years, it was the largest refinery in Cleveland. But Cleveland had 30 refineries. Competition was fierce. Margins were thin. Most refineries operated at the edge of bankruptcy. This is where Rockefeller's genius emerged. He didn't try to compete on price. He tried to eliminate competition entirely. And he did it through a method that would become the foundation of corporate America. Vertical integration. Vertical integration means controlling every stage of production. Most refineries just refined oil. They bought crude from drillers, refined it, and sold kerosene to distributors. They controlled one step. Rockefeller decided to control all the steps. He bought the barrel-making factories, so he didn't have to buy barrels. He bought tank cars and railroads to ship his own oil. He bought his own warehouses for storage. He bought the distribution networks to sell directly to consumers. Every step that used to be a separate business generating profit for someone else, Rockefeller brought in-house. This gave him massive cost advantages. While competitors paid 25 cents per barrel from barrel makers, Rockefeller made his own for 15 cents. While competitors paid railroads to ship oil, Rockefeller owned the tank cars and negotiated secret rebates. The railroads paid him to ship his oil and charged competitors more. This wasn't just efficient, this was predatory. Rockefeller could sell kerosene at prices that put competitors out of business while still making profit. And that's exactly what he did. By 1870, Rockefeller created Standard Oil Company of Ohio. His refinery capacity had grown from one small plant to the largest refining operation in the world. But he still only controlled 4% of American refining. That wasn't enough. So Rockefeller launched the second phase of his strategy, horizontal integration. If vertical integration is controlling the entire supply chain, horizontal integration is buying or destroying every competitor. In 1872, Rockefeller initiated what historians call the Cleveland Massacre. Over 3 months, Rockefeller approached every refinery owner in Cleveland. He offered to buy their refineries. If they agreed, he paid fair market value and often hired them as managers. If they refused, he launched a price war. Rockefeller would drop the price of kerosene below cost. His competitors, who couldn't produce as cheaply, lost money on every sale. They had 2 choices: sell to Rockefeller or go bankrupt. Most sold. A few fought. They all lost. By the end of 1872, Rockefeller controlled 25 of Cleveland's 26 refineries. He went from 4% to 25% of American refining capacity in 3 months. This was the blueprint: offer to buy. If they refuse, destroy them economically. Then buy the ruins. This method would be used in every industry by every monopoly for the next 150 years. But Rockefeller wasn't satisfied with Cleveland. He wanted the entire country. Through the 1870s, Rockefeller expanded Standard Oil across America. He bought refineries in New York, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Baltimore. He used the same tactics everywhere: secret railroad rebates that made his shipping costs lower than competitors, vertical integration that made his production costs the lowest, and ruthless price wars that destroyed anyone who refused to sell. By 1879, Standard Oil controlled 90% of America's refining capacity. 90%? That's not a business, that's a monopoly. But here's where Rockefeller's true genius emerged. He understood that monopolies face 2 problems. First, they're illegal. The Sherman Antitrust Act was passed in 1890 specifically to break up monopolies like Standard Oil. Second, they're hated. The public despised Rockefeller. He was called a robber baron, a ruthless tyrant, the most hated man in America. Rockefeller needed a solution to both problems, and he found it: the trust. In 1882, Rockefeller's lawyers created the Standard Oil Trust. Here's how it worked. Standard Oil of Ohio couldn't legally own companies in other states, but a trust could. Rockefeller created a trust that held the stock of all Standard Oil companies. 41 shareholders, all Rockefeller and his close associates, controlled the trust. The trust controlled the companies. This was the first major corporate trust in American history, and it became the model for every trust that followed: Sugar Trust, Tobacco Trust, Steel Trust. All copied Rockefeller's structure. The trust allowed Rockefeller to control a nationwide monopoly while technically complying with state laws. But more importantly, it created a new legal entity. The trust wasn't a company, it was a holding company. It didn't produce anything, it just owned other companies. The structure would evolve into the modern corporation, the parent company that owns subsidiaries: Berkshire Hathaway, Alphabet, Meta, Amazon. They're all descendants of Rockefeller's trust. By 1904, Standard Oil controlled 91% of oil refining in America and 85% of final sales. Rockefeller was the richest man in the world. His net worth was $900 million. That's $25 billion in today's money. But that's just paper wealth. At his peak in 1913, Rockefeller was worth $400 billion, inflation-adjusted dollars. Richer than Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Bill Gates combined. The richest individual in modern history. And he built that wealth through the system: vertical integration, horizontal consolidation, legal structures that concentrated control. This was the system. But the public was turning against monopolies. In 1890, Congress passed the Sherman Antitrust Act.
So the devils, all right, you see how predatory, this was. Where they will buy you out. So down with you having something to pass down, as an inheritance. Okay. Down with your family and your workers, and you see. So the devil, he just devoured okay, everything, man. This is how Esau works. This is how he does in everything. This is how Esau operates in everything he does. He can never have enough. Okay, like now he has 90%, okay, of oil refinery, okay, in America, where he's trying to figure out how can I take the other 10%. Okay, that's how these devils think. You see, real quick, you see, the scriptures describe this man perfectly, man. So let's go here, and then we'll go back to the video, okay? Because it gets worse, But the model that this devil Rockefeller laid out with these trust companies, okay, which are called parent companies today. Now you have what you call shell companies, Okay, to where like Facebook is a shell company for a government, okay, company. Okay, they make it seem like these certain companies are private, but when they're really government owned and financed. All right, for government purposes and agendas. You see, but you have this thing called the parent company that owns all these other companies, man. Okay, you have a few media companies that own all the media in the world. Okay, this illusion of choice. You're thinking that you're choosing between Pepsi and Coke, but then these things are all under the what Brown Bottling. Okay, the parent company. You know, so it's the same. All right, few people that own the majority of business. You look at all these different businesses and you think that this you got variety, you got choice. Okay, but you're just choosing from which branch the same tree that you do business with. Okay, but let's go here. Um, let's get to the book of Habakkuk. It's the book of Habakkuk, chapter 2 and verse 4 says, "Behold, his soul which is lifted up is not upright in him, but the just shall live by faith." And let's get this word upright. All right. So you get this word upright in the Hebrew, okay, which is Yashar. Okay, and what does it mean? Okay. Yashar says to be right, to be straight, okay, to be just, to be lawful, okay, to be pleasing, okay, to be agreeable. Okay. That's what Yashar means. But he's not these things, to be straightforward, okay, to make right, to make smooth. No, he's not those things. Okay. Because like I said, the people hated this guy because they had to deal, okay, with tyranny. See, as they celebrate this one man's wealth, millions of people are being impoverished. Okay, just like and I say the same thing. I was thinking about it when I was listening to the video. It's the same thing with dope boys. Okay, everybody celebrate the wealth of this one man while hundreds of families are being destroyed. Okay, thousands of families are being destroyed at the expense of this one man's wealth. You know, he's a hero. He's celebrated, as a hero at the expense of impoverishing families and making families dysfunctional. Okay, which even with that, even that goes back to eat. All right, but everybody's, has a guilt. You're still guilty for participating in the wickedness of this man, especially seeing the results of it. Okay, but that's this devil. They'll have all type of awards and things named after the devil for his accomplishments. But look at the expense his accomplishment came at the suffering of many. And this Edomite society where they'll celebrate the accomplishments of these particular men, but not go into the horror that it caused many. Okay, and this is why he was hated, because people really had to deal with the reality of not having companies that they work for, that they invested into, and families, passed down to them, and now, they don't have them anymore. Okay, so let's play this. Go back to it. Okay, well, let me finish this. All right, so this devil he's not upright. He can't be straightforward. There's always some type of underhand, okay, dealings with this guy. You see? So let's go here to Habakkuk 2 and 5. It says, yeah, also because he transgresses by wine, he is a proud man, neither keep it at home. You know, and let's say he takes over, you know, a city, you know, then he takes over a state, then he takes over the country, then he wants the world. Okay, this is how the devil operates, man. He's always trying to scale out. Okay, and he's all over the place, seeing what he can take, what he can add to himself at the suffering of many. He doesn't care about the suffering. If he can add to himself, people's suffering is not factored in. You know, if he can add to his vain legacies, people's suffering is not factored in. Okay, he doesn't care what happens to the environment, what happens to the locals, and you know what happens to his families, and you know he doesn't care about the traditions of people, and he don't care about any of that, what you consider sacred, and he don't care about that. If he can add to himself, what happens to you doesn't matter. Okay, it says he is a proud man, neither keep it at home, who enlarges his desire as hell, and is as death, and cannot be satisfied, but gather unto him all nations, and heap it unto him all people. Okay, so this man can't be satisfied, man. Okay, if he has 99% control of something, okay, you got 99.9% control, okay, of a particular market. Well, he can't sleep until he figure out how to take the other 0.1%. Okay, he can never be satisfied. You know, and even this new world order shows you he can't be satisfied, because as we finish going, as we continue on in this video, it's like, God damn, you see, but even that's not enough. Okay, he wants more. He wants your thoughts now. What you thinking, nigga? You see, he want to take it to that level. Okay, so this is why this man's an unfit ruler, because it'll never be enough. If he was able to get the digital system up and running, you know, that wouldn't even satisfy him. That would just suffice him for a while. Then he will see what else can he do? What else can he take? Okay, I done hacked humans, so what else can I do? Okay, this man is an unfit ruler, man. He's a goddamn psychopath. Okay, so let's go back.
Making monopolies legal. In 1906, investigative journalist Ida Tarbell published The History of the Standard Oil Company, exposing Rockefeller's tactics: secret railroad rebates, predatory pricing, crushing competitors. The outcry was enormous. In 1911, the Supreme Court ruled that Standard Oil was an illegal monopoly and ordered it broken up into 34 separate companies. This should have been the end, the destruction of the system, but it wasn't. It was the beginning of the system's evolution, because when Standard Oil was broken up, Rockefeller still owned shares in all 34 companies. Standard Oil of New Jersey became Exxon. Standard Oil of New York became Mobil. Standard Oil of California became Chevron. Standard Oil of Indiana became Amoco. Standard Oil of Ohio became Sohio, later bought by BP. The breakup didn't destroy Rockefeller's wealth, it multiplied it. Before the breakup, Standard Oil stock was worth about $600 per share. After the breakup, the combined value of all 34 companies was worth over $2,000 per share. Rockefeller's wealth tripled. Why? Because the breakup forced each company to compete, which drove innovation and efficiency. And because breaking one monopoly into 34 companies that still dominated their regional markets wasn't really breaking up the monopoly, it was just reorganizing it. Today, most of those 34 companies have merged back together. Exxon and Mobil merged in 1999. Chevron bought Standard Oil of Kentucky and Gulf Oil. BP bought Amoco and Sohio. The Standard Oil monopoly that was broken up in 1911 has essentially reconsolidated into Exxon, Mobil, Chevron, and BP. The system broke itself up to avoid regulation, then quietly put itself back together over 100 years. But Standard Oil isn't even Rockefeller's most enduring legacy. The real legacy is the system itself. The methods, the structures, the playbook. Let me show you how it's being used right now. Amazon uses vertical integration exactly like Rockefeller. Amazon started as an online bookstore. Now it controls the entire supply chain. It owns the warehouses, the logistics network, the delivery trucks, the payment processing, the cloud infrastructure that hosts its competitors' websites. Amazon Web Services, AWS, generates $90 billion in annual revenue. That's more than Amazon's retail profit. Rockefeller controlled refineries, railroads, and distribution. Amazon controls retail, logistics, and cloud computing. Same playbook, different century. Amazon also uses horizontal consolidation. It buys competitors, Whole Foods, Zappos, Twitch, Ring, MGM Studios, over 100 acquisitions. When it can't buy a competitor, it copies their products and undercuts their prices using data from its own marketplace. Third-party sellers report their sales data to Amazon. Amazon analyzes that data, identifies successful products, creates Amazon Basics versions, and promotes them above the original. This is the modern version of Rockefeller's price war, legal, barely regulated, and devastatingly effective. Google uses the trust structure. Alphabet is a holding company that owns Google, YouTube, Waymo, DeepMind, Verily, and dozens of other subsidiaries. It's the Standard Oil Trust, one parent company controlling multiple operating companies. This structure shields the parent from liability, allows tax optimization across jurisdictions, and makes regulatory breakup complicated because each subsidiary is technically separate.
When your kid is hurting and there's nothing you can do about it.
Pharmaceutical companies use Rockefeller's regulatory capture strategy. Rockefeller didn't just compete in markets, he shaped the rules. He lobbied for railroad regulations that favored Standard Oil. He worked with politicians to set standards for kerosene that his refineries could meet, but competitors couldn't. Today, pharmaceutical companies do the same. They fund the FDA through user fees. They lobby for patent extensions. They write the regulations they're supposedly regulated by. Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, Merck, they learned from Rockefeller. Control the regulators, and you control the market. The financial sector uses holding company structures. JP Morgan Chase is a holding company that owns...
That's why you see, all right, these tech giants, okay, controlling Trump, all right, and Trump controls the regulation, all right, and that's why you see massive, deregulation, okay, for AI, okay, because AI is the new Standard Oil, okay, these AI tech companies, okay, this is a new Standard Oil. Okay, your Peter Thiels, your Elon Musk, okay, which they're still, financed by the banks. So ultimately, it's the banks that run the show. Okay, these elite bankers, you see. But you see, the main thing that's been happening with Trump is what things are being deregulated. All right, towards the agenda of these tech giants, which is the agenda of the elites. Okay, who want a new world order. You see, that's why your government doesn't work for you. All right, it hasn't worked for you in a long time. This is just the worst that has ever been. All right, in the Trump era. Okay, so these elites, they own, all right, these certain, bureaucracies that's supposed to regulate these big companies. Well, they've all been paid for. Okay, so everything that these big companies want to do, well, they're going to pass regulations to allow it, just like we've seen with the glyphosate, okay, Forever Chemical being allowed to be sprayed on crops, okay, because Monsanto, you see, they own, okay, these bureaucracies. All right, these things are bought and paid for. So the super rich, okay, have been unleashed on the masses. That's what the new world order is, the super rich fully being unleashed on the masses, man. All right, and they want to monopolize, okay, the earth, every resource, even the air. Carbon is him trying to monopolize air, man. This whole carbon footprint, this is this devil trying to monopolize the air. It gotta be stopped, man.
Chase Bank, JP Morgan Investment Bank, and numerous subsidiaries. Bank of America, Citigroup, Wells Fargo, all holding companies. When Dodd-Frank tried to regulate banks after 2008, the holding company structure made it nearly impossible. Which entity do you regulate, the parent or the subsidiaries? Rockefeller solved this problem in 1882. Banks copied the solution 100 years later. And then there's philanthropy, Rockefeller's final innovation. In 1913, Rockefeller created the Rockefeller Foundation with an initial gift of $250 million, over $7 billion today. The foundation funded medical research, education, and public health. On the surface, this was charity, Rockefeller giving back. But look deeper. The foundation allowed Rockefeller to avoid estate taxes. It gave him control over which universities received funding, which meant control over what was taught and researched.
So he's funding these schools, the Rockefeller Foundation, which is still around, which the Rockefeller Foundation is at the forefront, okay, even today, of this New World Order agenda. Okay, the Rockefeller Foundation, that's at the forefront of a lot of these agendas that we see going on today. Central bank digital currency, all right, police state surveillance. The Rockefeller Foundation is at the forefront of that today. Okay, but you see how he's funding these schools, he's giving these donations to these schools, but he controls what these schools teach. Okay, he controls, he donates to these hospitals. Guess what? He controls, okay, what's medicine. Okay, a lot of medicine went to what? Petroleum base. Okay, because he was rich in oil, so he infused, petroleum into medicines. Okay, would enrich himself at what? At the destruction of the masses. Okay, and the scriptures say that we get that, we bring this out a lot. Let's get this real quick. We're gonna run that back a little bit. But yeah, man, these devils. Let's see. Yeah, these devils, man, have a lot going on. All right, and they control mostly everything you see in society. They own everything, man. Okay, somehow, some way, okay, everything is rooted back to them. All right, and one of these major, all right, trust, parent companies. Okay, they call BlackRock. Okay, all the things that BlackRock owns. Okay, and BlackRock is still just a branch, okay, of the Rothschilds. Okay, just one of the branches of Rothschilds, an entity, okay, of the Rothschild assets. Okay, so you go here. So let's go to Sirach 14:7. It says, and if he do it good, he do it unwillingly, and at the last he will declare his wickedness. So he's donating all this money to these schools. Okay, they're able to get the new campus, and the new new stadiums, new buildings. People getting, give themselves bonuses and this and that. Okay, but then it's like, okay, look, this is what we gonna teach. Okay, and then you go into a Rockefeller. He turned the school into he turned the curriculum that pretty much to train factory workers. Okay, school is about you learning, okay, how to comply and operate in the factory setting. Okay, and while you have your scheduled lunches, okay, your scheduled classes, okay, that morning shift, that the early in the morning to the evening schedule. Okay, sitting down, being compliant all day. You're learning how to take instructions. Okay, school turns into a pipeline. Okay, to be a worker in his industries. All right, you can continue your education in college. Okay, but it's still what college is training you to. Okay, for his industries. Okay, you're not being taught, okay, self-sufficiency. Okay? You're being taught how to play a position, okay, within his monopoly. You see? So these devils, okay, have this whole system geared towards keeping them rich and everyone else at the expense of everyone else's slavery. Okay, especially the tribes. All right, now let's run it back just a little bit.
The holding company structure made it nearly impossible. Which entity do you regulate, the parent or the subsidiaries? Rockefeller solved this problem in 1882. Banks copied the solution 100 years later. And then there's philanthropy, Rockefeller's final innovation. In 1913, Rockefeller created the Rockefeller Foundation with an initial gift of $250 million, over $7 billion today. The foundation funded medical research, education, and public health. On the surface, this was charity, Rockefeller giving back. But look deeper. The foundation allowed Rockefeller to avoid estate taxes. It gave him control over which universities received funding, which meant control over what was taught and researched. It bought him legitimacy. The man who destroyed thousands of competitors was now a philanthropist. The most hated man in America became a beloved benefactor. The Rockefeller Foundation funded the creation of modern medical education. It funded Johns Hopkins, University of Chicago, Rockefeller University. It established the model for medical schools that emphasized pharmaceutical interventions over holistic care. This isn't conspiracy theory. This is documented history. The foundation shaped American medicine.
You see that? Okay. So you see who controls, what's, okay, these pills in the bottle. All right, these companies that have these pills in the bottle. You see what it goes back to. All right, remember, his father, okay, was a con man that sold fake cancer cures. Go back to his father. So now this nigga is a billionaire, trillionaire. And you see where the world is at. Okay? You can't make it up. All right? This is the devil, man. This is the come up of the devil, man. You see? So the juice that was going out, who you think? Okay? And remember, these people hate life. Okay? And their wealth is used to destroy some predatory system like a raging lion, okay, or a roaring bear. Okay?
To favor the pharmaceutical model. And pharmaceutical companies, many descended from Standard Oil's chemical divisions, profited enormously. Today, every billionaire uses the Rockefeller playbook. Bill Gates founded the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, $75 billion in assets. It funds global health initiatives, shapes WHO policy, and influences national governments. Mark Zuckerberg created the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. Warren Buffett pledged most of his wealth to the Gates Foundation. These aren't just charity, they're tax avoidance, legacy building, and policy influence. Rockefeller invented the model. Modern billionaires perfected it. The Rockefeller family still exists, still influential. David Rockefeller, John D's grandson, died in 2017 at age 101. He was chairman of Chase Manhattan Bank, founder of the Trilateral Commission, one of the most powerful men in global finance for 50 years. The family's wealth, estimated at $11 billion, is spread across hundreds of trusts and foundations. The Rockefeller Brothers Fund, the Rockefeller Family Fund, the David Rockefeller Fund. They still shape policy, fund research, and influence politics 150 years after John D. started Standard Oil. And here's the most important part. The system isn't designed to be escaped. It's designed to be invisible until you're already trapped. You buy gasoline refined by ExxonMobil or Chevron, descendants of Standard Oil. You buy from Amazon, which uses Rockefeller's vertical integration and horizontal consolidation. You search on Google, structured as a trust like Standard Oil. You take pharmaceuticals developed through a medical system shaped by Rockefeller Foundation grants. You bank with institutions using Rockefeller's holding company structures. And your taxes fund regulations written by the industries being regulated just like Rockefeller designed. The system is self-perpetuating. It concentrates wealth. It eliminates competition. It captures regulators. And it uses philanthropy to buy legitimacy while avoiding taxes. This is the Rockefeller system. And it's not a conspiracy. It's just corporate structure. Legal, accepted, and replicated by every dominant company in every major industry. You cannot buy oil outside the descendants of Standard Oil. You cannot avoid Amazon's logistics network. You cannot opt out of pharmaceutical medicine shaped by Rockefeller grants. You cannot escape the banking system built on Rockefeller's holding company model. You live inside the system, and the system extracts wealth from you every single day and concentrates it at the top, exactly as Rockefeller designed it to do in 1870.
Look, you could spend thousands hiring a professional video editor, or you could use Animoto.
Here's what makes Rockefeller different from other robber barons. Carnegie built steel mills. When he died, U.S. Steel remained, but Carnegie's personal control ended. Vanderbilt built railroads. When he died, the railroads continued, but fragmented. J.P. Morgan built financial empires. When he died, his partners carried on, but his personal dominance faded. But Rockefeller built a system, and systems don't die with their creators. They evolve, they adapt, they spread. Standard Oil was broken up in 1911, but the vertical integration model spread to every industry. The trust structure became the holding company. The regulatory capture became lobbying. The philanthropy became foundations. Every piece of Rockefeller's system was copied, refined, and embedded into corporate law, tax code, and regulatory frameworks. Rockefeller died in 1937, but his system became stronger after his death because it wasn't dependent on him. It was structural. Let me show you the mechanism. How the system extracts wealth from you. You need gasoline, you have a choice. Exxon, Chevron, BP, Shell. All of them are price-coordinated oligopolies descended from Standard Oil or using its methods. You're not choosing. You're selecting between branches of the same tree. You need to buy products. You have a choice. Amazon, Walmart, Target. Amazon dominates through vertical integration. Walmart and Target must match its scale or die. Same system, different companies. You need internet search. Google has 92% market share. That's higher than Standard Oil's peak of 91%. But Google isn't considered a monopoly by regulators because it's free. You pay with data instead of money. Rockefeller would have loved this innovation. A monopoly so complete that users don't even realize they're paying. You need social media. Facebook has 3 billion users. Instagram, also Facebook. WhatsApp, also Facebook. You're not choosing platforms. You're choosing which meta property to use. Horizontal consolidation, exactly like Rockefeller. You need healthcare. You see a doctor trained in a system shaped by Rockefeller Foundation grants. You receive pharmaceuticals developed by companies using patents, regulations, and structures pioneered by Standard Oil's chemical divisions. You pay insurance companies using Rockefeller's corporate structures. Every step, extraction. Every choice, an illusion. The average American spends $4,000 per year on gasoline, $3,000 per year on Amazon, $5,000 per year on healthcare beyond insurance, $4,200 per year on internet and technology services. That's $1,392 per year flowing to companies using a Rockefeller system. Over a lifetime, that's $660,000 of wealth transfer, not to innovative startups or small businesses, to monopolistic corporations using 150-year-old tactics to eliminate competition and extract maximum profit. And you cannot escape it. You could refuse to buy gasoline, but you need to work, which requires transportation. You could refuse to use Amazon, but competitive pricing and convenience make it nearly impossible to avoid. You could refuse Google, but what alternative has 92% market share? You could refuse Facebook, but social connection is controlled by Meta's platforms. You could refuse pharmaceutical medicine, but medical licensing, insurance coverage, and cultural acceptance are all shaped by the Rockefeller system. This is Rockefeller's ultimate achievement. Not that he became the richest man in history, that he built a system that makes escape impossible, a system where every path leads back to consolidated corporate control, where competition is crushed before it threatens the dominant players, where regulators protect incumbents instead of consumers, where philanthropy buys influence that perpetuates the system. This is the Rockefeller system, and you live in it whether you know it or not. But here's what Rockefeller understood that most people miss.
Yeah, so, yeah, he covers a lot, and so he breaks it down thoroughly, okay, what these devils are on, the systems that they have in place, especially what they call philanthropists, all right, which these Edomites make big donations, they put their names on certain buildings and, libraries and museums and, as if, they have, people's interests in mind, all right, but they do that, for the sake to legitimize, okay, their legacy, as if, they have a care for humanity. Okay, so this nigga built a library, all right, but ruin millions of lives. All right, give you, Like I say, those pills in the bottle that destroy you, give you the juice that destroy you. Okay, environmental pollution that destroy you. But then a nigga build you a library, you know, at your school. Okay, and now all of a sudden he's this great nigga that needs to be honored. Okay, an award named after him, a scholarship named after them, you know, all these different things. Why they destroy the earth? Okay, why they impoverish the masses? Okay, and continue to enrich themselves. Okay, so let's go to the scriptures, and then I got some things in chat to show you that the Most High hates, all right, systems of monopoly. Okay, the Most High and Yahweh Shai. All right, but let's go here. Let's get a few of these because the Bible describes this man. All right, describes this man. Okay, when you go here, you know it will describe the Bible describes the state of the wicked. Okay, it goes into their prosperity. Okay, this is the book of Psalms. All right, 73. Okay, and I started at 3. It said, "For I was envious, okay, at the foolish when I saw the prosperity of the wicked. For there are no bands in their death, but their strength is firm." Yeah, because it shows you, like, even this guy Rockefeller, and he's just one of many. Even though he died, their system set up to where his family prospers. Okay, and all right, the suffering of the masses. Okay, so this small elite group, okay, each generation gets more wealthy. Okay, they get more control to the point we at today where they're trying to roll out, they're trying to merge you with machines now. Okay, but it started, all right, with these few families enriching themselves, okay, at the expense of many. Okay, so each generation has become what? Stronger, man. Okay, it said they are not trouble, that they're not in trouble as other men. Yeah, they don't have the worries. All right, that people worried about paying this and paying that, and, you know, they don't worry about expenses, and no, they way beyond that. Okay, they don't have the worries. Okay, of normal men. Okay, you know they have wealth. What's say generational wealth? Okay, well they have wealth that will last generations. Literally, man. Okay, they have hundreds, you know, thousands of years worth of wealth. Okay, and it's steady trickling in, it's steady increasing. Technology has made monopoly worse. Okay, it has made wealth consolidation worse. You see, it said they are not in trouble as other men, neither are they plagued, okay, like other men. Therefore, pride compasses them about as a chain. There was a pride. Violence covered them as a garment. Okay, and these devils will go to war to protect these systems, man. A lot of these wars and conflicts that we see, all right, be for these devils to, you know, to rob, to loot, and to protect these existing systems that they have in place. Okay, it said, therefore, pride compasses them about as a chain, violence covered them as a garment. Their eyes stand out with fatness. They have more than one could wish. Okay, they have more than one could wish, man. Their eyes continually stand out with fatness, trying to see what else can they get, what else can they accumulate. Can never be satisfied. Okay, and they have much more than what's needed. Okay, but their mindset is on more. All right, of the destruction of many. You see, so you go here to show you how even the Bible, it condemns. Let's go here. Monopoly. Let's go into the chat. I got a few of them pulled up. Not that one. right. So I asked you, I said, would the Bible be against an elite few having a monopoly within society? Short answer, yes. It said the Bible consistently warns about a small elite gaining oppressive control over society, especially when the power leads to exploitation, economic injustice, or neglect of the poor. The Bible warns about concentrated power, all right, and economic oppression. Many biblical passages criticize situations where a small group becomes wealthy or powerful at the expense of others. It said, woe to those, Isaiah 5 and 8, woe to those who join house to house and add field to field until there is no more room. Okay, this is, the wealthy buying up, okay, all the land, okay, all the assets, and leaving nothing, for the poor, okay, a few elites, okay. So the Bible directly condemns this man's style of rulership to where you have a few buying up and owning everything, okay, and redistributing to everyone else, redistributing, goods and services to everyone else. It said this condemns wealthy elites who monopolize land, pushing others into poverty. All right, Michael 2 and 1 said they covered fields and seized them. They oppress a man and his inheritance. Again, the warning is against powerful groups who take ownership of the community's resources, man. All right, and this is what the devil does throughout the earth. He's constantly seizing the resources, lands. Okay, a lot of these wars are fought at the interests of the elite bankers. All wars are banker wars, man. Okay? It said they cover fields and seize them, they oppress a man and his inheritance. Again, the warning is against powerful groups who take ownership of the community's resources. Now you go to Amos 5 and 8, it says, criticize those who manipulate markets, cheat the poor, and rig the economy, making the ephah small and the shekel great by buying the poor for silver. Now let's go to this, and we're going to dive into um, Amos 8, verses 4 through 6. Okay, and this is what Jake was on. Okay, and the Lord was against it. So when you go here real quick, let's get that in Amos, the book of Amos, chapter 8. Let's get it in there too. All right, so you got the book of Amos, chapter 8. This is Amos 8 and 4. It says, listen to this, you who rob the poor and trample down the needy. Okay, you can't wait for the Sabbath day to be over and the religious festivals to end so you can get back to cheating the helpless. You measure our grain with dishonest measures and cheat the buyer with dishonest scales. Okay, so you had Jake doing this. Okay, cheating the market. Okay, it says Hebrews says you make the ephah a unit of measure of grain small, and the shekel, this is a footnote, a unit of weight. All right, great, and you deal falsely by using deceitful balances, man. Okay, it says that you mix the grain. All right, you sell with chaff swept from the floor. Then you enslave poor people for one piece of silver or one pair of sandals. Okay, which is putting people in debt. Okay, so the Lord, all right, he's cursing Jake out for doing this, man, for being wicked in the market and dealing with the poor unjustly, man. Okay, and Esau does on a massive scale. Okay, with much more death involved. Now, just to go back to the chat, let's go here. So when you go into 8, verses 4 through 6. All right, it says, I'm gonna read into it. It says the Bible vision of society is anti-monopolistic. The Old Testament economic system prevented permanent monopolies. The year of Jubilee, Leviticus 25. Every 50 years, land was returned to original families. This stopped an elite class from forming permanent economic monopolies. It said limits on kings. Kings were forbidden, all right, from amassing excessive wealth or military power. This prevented political monopolies. Howard Shah teaching emphasized justice, fairness, and condemning exploitation. While not political, Howard Shah repeatedly condemned systems where a few benefit at the expense of many. All right, Luke 12:15. Watch for all kinds of greed. All right, Matthew 23:4. It said they tied up heavy burdens, dealing with the leadership back then, the wicked scribes, Pharisees, Sadducees of the Sanhedrin, but would not lift up a finger to move them. A critique of religious and political elites exploiting, the people. They even made sin into a market. We're going to get that. It says Yahweh Shah frames his missions in terms of liberation of the oppressed. It says, what the Bible doesn't condemn. The Bible doesn't condemn, all right, does not say that having wealth of leadership is inherently wrong. What it condemns is using power to exploit others, removing economic mobility, meaning no one can ever, increase in the system. All right, hoarding resources, and redistributing, all right, to your liking, creating systems where the poor cannot improve their situation. Is this not the current situation of today? And it has gotten much worse. Okay, it said the overall biblical message strongly suggests that a monopoly held by an elite few, especially one that harms or restricts the rest of society, is contrary to biblical ethics, man. Okay, and this is why the Lord say he's gonna despise their image. He despises their image. Okay, this rulership that the devil has established in the earth today is anti-Messiah, is anti-Yahweh Bashim Yahushua. Okay, the Lord despises how this man runs the earth, and everything. And that's why it's going to be so much destruction. That's why America is going to be a desert. Okay, nukes going to hit different places, and you see, the earth going to rail to and fro, man. The Lord hates this system, man. That's why I say friends with this world is enmity with the Most High. Okay, the Lord absolutely hates this world system, man. Okay, so let's dive into Amos 8 verses 4 through 6. It says so I told him the emphasis on Amos chapter 8 verses 4 through 6, details of a ephah and shekel and what is chaff being mixed with wheat. Okay, so it goes down to Amos 4 and 6. What's happening in this passage? Amos is condemning wealthy merchants who are manipulating measurements, fixing prices. All this should sound familiar. Manipulating measurements, fixing prices, selling low quality or fake goods, exploiting the poor during religious festivals by waiting eagerly to resume cheating. Okay, this is an early powerful denunciation of market manipulation and economic oppression. Okay, what do you have today? What are people crying about? All these videos about the fake foods and additives and the price shrinkflation, and you see economic oppression. Can't afford this, can't afford that. Meanwhile, these few own everything and are gathering more. It said the ephah is a measure of volume used for grain, roughly about 22 liters. Okay, and it says use the way we use a bushel or gallon today. In other words, shrinking the container, all right, while charging full price. Today's equivalent, shortchanging customers using false or rigged scales, reducing product size but keeping price the same, which is shrinkflation. Okay, what is a shekel? The shekel was a unit of weight in currency. Merchant used silver to measure payment. It says making the shekel great, using a heavier weight. All right, so the buyer must overpay. You see, using a heavier weight. All right, because you'll put the silver on one side and you have the weight. So their weight's supposed to be a fixed weight. But if you make the weight heavier, then it takes more, okay, of silver to get their weight to balance out. Okay, so they will rig the scales. Just like this economy is rigged, the stock market is rigged, the banking system is rigged, insurance is rigged, everything is rigged. This is a system of false scales. And today's the housing market, everything is on a false scale. Today's equivalent is inflating prices, rigged digital scales, deceptive pricing practices. Okay, this line from Amos is classic condemnation of fraud and trade. It says, what does it mean to mix chaff, okay, with wheat? This is one of the most vivid images in the passages. Chaff is the husk. All right, so chaff, it says the worthless, inedible. You see, doesn't the devil put things in the food that's not edible, that's not supposed to be edible? Okay, the chemicals, the additives. Okay, it said the worthless edible outer shell of grain. All right, normally removed during threshing and winnowing, mixing chaff, okay, with wheat, diluting the grain. All right, diluting the grain to stretch it. It's a form of food fraud. All right, blending cheap, useless materials with real grain, selling it as pure product, increasing profit while reducing quality. Modern equivalents, watering down milk, mixing sawdust or fillers into food, selling fake olive oil, adding impurities to extend volume, man. Okay, so this shows you that the Lord spoke against these things back then. Okay, so how much more now? Okay, it says why Amos condemned these practices, because these actions exploit the poor who cannot afford even small losses. Here it is, you $30 to you is $30-$50. Okay, these elites they don't even think in them terms. $30-$50 doesn't even register with the wealth they got. But for you, it can destroy your week. Okay, an extra $40-$60 destroy your week. Your tank of gas for the week, it'll destroy your week. Okay, and these devils, they play games to where people are at the mercy of the rich, the poor at the mercy of the rich. And this is why the Lord has us in these positions, so we get in rulership, man. We're gonna be balanced, man. We're gonna understand, okay, scenarios that the people that we're ruling over, they're gonna be in. And this is after that 1,000 years. Because that 1,000 years is gonna be all labor. It's time gonna work. All right, nigga ain't gonna have no bank account within that 1,000 years. You ain't gonna have, you don't need nothing but labor. Okay, you ain't you just labor for 1,000 years. But after that 1,000 years, you still gonna be in servitude, but it's gonna be under righteous rulers. Okay. So it says it break covenant law, Leviticus 19:35 through 36. It said commands honest weights and measures. It says destroy trust in community, put profit above justice, all right, and compassion. All right. So let's go from there. Because remember when Yahweh Shai beat Jake out the temple. Let's go from there. I ain't planning on to be this long, but so like, appreciate y'all for rocking with it. I just found quite a bit, that relate to the day. I asked it the wrong question. I said, why did the Messiah beat the priest out of the temple? But it was the money changers and the merchants. But it goes into it, and then we're gonna go into it a little more thorough. It says, what actually happened according to the Gospels in the New Testament, found in Matthew 21, Mark 11, Luke 19, and John the 2nd chapter. Yahweh Shai enters the temple and sees money changers, charging unfair rates, merchants selling animals for sacrifice, a marketplace atmosphere inside a sacred space. Yahweh Shai overreacts by overturning the tables of the money changers, driving out the merchants, condemning the exploitation of worshipers. Okay? It says, according to the gospel, Yahweh Shai did this because the temple was being corrupted. He said, my house shall be called a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of thieves. People were being exploited. The system took advantage of pilgrims who had to buy animals or exchange currency at unfair rates. Okay? By cleansing the temple, Yahweh Shai signaled judgment against the religious corruption and asserted spiritual authority. Now, I said details of the corrupt practices and merchants, of the merchants and money, traders in this account. It says, so you go here. It says the money changers. It said money changers were necessary because the temple tax could only be paid in Tyrian silver, which had a high and stable silver content. I remember the pilgrims that is speaking of. Remember every 3 times a year, families were, Israelite families that had to come back to Jerusalem and celebrate and reverence the Passover, the Feast of Weeks, which is called Pentecost, and the Feast of Tabernacles. So they would you have an influx of Israelites coming to the temple, 3 times a year, in the spring, and in the fall, twice in the spring, once in the fall, and what would happen, these money changers and merchants, they started to make a racket off of it, and it was corrupt, and it's going to go into it. You see, they were doing this all throughout the year, but they went crazy during the 3 times a year when you had all these Israelites coming back to the temple. Even Yahweh Shai. That's why I said, they was coming to reverence, at the temple, and they was on the way back, and that's when Yahweh Shai stayed back in Jerusalem. But that was on one of them pilgrimages. Yahweh Shai used to have to make them pilgrimage to Jerusalem. Him, Joseph, and Mary had to make their pilgrimage. John, they had to make their pilgrimage to the temple. But that's the account in Luke when he fell back and stayed in the temple asking questions. And it says corrupt practices associated with them. It said excessive exchange fees. Money changers charge, a kalibas, a premium fee. Sources indicate this fee was often inflated, especially during pilgrim festivals, Passover, when hundreds of thousands of Jews came to Jerusalem, exploiting, captive demand. Everyone had to exchange money. No alternative currency was accepted. This created a monopoly, enabling high charges. So you had to exchange the money or the currency that you used from where you was at, and you had to change it over to the Tyrian silver, the shekel. So what they would do, they would rig the scales to where they would get a whole bunch of your currency, and you wouldn't get that much shekel. It says the change, tables were set inside a sacred area, turning it into a bustling marketplace, violating the spirit of worship. So they turned, here it is. They put these tables inside the temple. Okay, Jacob just wilding. So they turned, the temple to a trap house, man. Okay, a place of corruption. They were doing the corruption inside the temple. They tripping. It said animal sellers for sacrifice. It said pilgrims needed animals without blemish for sacrifice, doves, sheep, and oxen. It said temple. It said animals brought from home. All right, animals brought from home had to be inspected. Mishnah sources suggest inspectors could easily declare animals blemished, forcing pilgrims to purchase a temple-approved animal instead. So you will bring your own sacrifice, all right, and they had to be inspected, all right, and then they can just say, well, look, this is not acceptable, but we got something for you to buy that's acceptable. Okay, so these these niggas, man, they just had corruption all the way around, man, and they back today. These men that sell you names and prayers and marriage counseling and this and that, these are the same niggas back today, the money exchangers. All right, they parade themselves as prophets, but they sell you every goddamn thing. Okay, it says exorbitant prices inside the temple. It said temple sanctioned animals were often massively overpriced. Rabbis later complained of dove sellers charging 10 times normal value during festivals. 10 times. Okay. Profit tied to priestly elites. Historically, sources, all right, Josephus, okay, describes certainly priestly families, especially the house of Anas, as running or controlling the trade. They essentially held a temple marketplace monopoly, profiting, okay, from required sacrifices. So the priests oversaw this. They was getting kickback. They was allowing this to happen in the temple. Okay. It says, Yahushua quotes Jeremiah, you have made it a den of thieves, indicating exploitation and injustice occurring around sacred worship. It said doves, the sacrifice of the poor, were particularly overpriced, which is why Yahushua specifically knocks over in Matthew 21:12 the seats of those who sold doves, because the poor can only afford, doves as their sacrifice. Okay? And Yahushua, he specifically knocked over that table, man. All right, Yahushua went crazy on the niggas in there, man. And imagine what he's coming to do to the bankers. Okay, because the earth is Yahushua's temple, man. So imagine what he's coming to do to the bankers. Okay, it says although the gospel does not show physically confronting priests, historical records show, all right, high priest families received kickback and directly managed the temple trades. This system was widely hated, and contemporaries accused of priestly aristocracy of greed, exhortation, all right, and violence. Okay, and there's a little more on there, but let's go here and draw this thing to a conclusion. Let's get this in let's get Psalm 72. Read a few out of that, because this is what Yahushua is coming back to do, is establish justice. Okay, true justice in the earth. All right, beginning with the restoration of his people. Okay, Psalm 72:1, it says, give your love of justice to the king. Okay, O power and righteousness to the king's son. This is Yahushua. Okay, Yahushua is coming back with a love for justice. Okay, help him judge your people in the right way. Let the poor always be treated fairly. May the mountains yield, all right, prosperity for all, which are the governments. All right, the government of Israel, man. Okay, and Israel, all right, is going to experience prosperity. The whole nation is going to experience, okay, prosperity like we never have. And may the hills, okay, be fruitful, man. Resources, man. Okay, It says, help him to defend the poor, to rescue the children of the needy, Israelites, okay, and crush their oppressors, okay? So this is what Yahushua is coming to do, man. Okay, he's coming to establish order, justice, prosperity for Israel, okay? Yahushua is coming to establish a righteous government forever in the earth, man. This is the last time the earth will be under a corrupt government, okay? So that's the point. You know, Lord will, you brothers and you sisters edify once again. I want to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushua, Bahashem, Kakodash, and double honors to the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples to his younger brothers, and peace and blessings, salutation, hopefully, shalom.